So I think you all got a folder. If you didn't, please grab it. We put a lot of good stuff in it. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McCarthy, and she will introduce our illustrious panel.
Hi everyone, welcome. Some of you I saw, was it just last week when we were here? And so here we're expanding our presentation and talking about preparing our students who are going off to college, our students who have IEPs or are receiving some sort of special education support. And so we've got a great panel tonight that I think is going to share a wealth of information. I was just saying to somebody, sometimes we need to hear this 2, 3, and 4 times. It's a lot of information, so those of you who have middle school children and you're here tonight, good for you, because you know, I'm a parent too, and I know that this is just a totally different language in any world, and there's a lot out there available to your children to support your kids as they prepare and go off to college. So hopefully you'll gain some information tonight. It is being recorded, so if you want to watch it over and over again, you can. So we appreciate that. Okay, so let me introduce our panels. Of course, Christy Evers is going to be facilitating some of the question and answers. Like Dawn said, Christy is our CSC chairperson for 8th graders in high school. And you're going to be seeing Christy this time, if you haven't seen her already, for the annual reviews of the children in that grade. So Christy's going to be facilitating some of the questions at the end. We have Carrie McKenna here. Carrie was good enough to be here, was it last week or right before vacation? He's here again tonight. Carrie is a transition specialist. And we started contracting with Carrie this year to help us with some particular students who have kind of more complex transition needs, but also just to make sure that we have all the information that we need to help support our students to transition from high school. And so Carrie will be speaking to you in a little while. Barbara Cerullo, is the owner of Future Step College Consulting in Goldings Bridge. And formerly, Barbara was the director of counseling for Scarsdale High School and also for Solomon Shelter. So thank you for bringing your experiences and expertise here. We have Karen Horowitz. So Karen currently is with ARC of Westchester, and she's the Transition Services Director. But many of us know Karen from her previous position, where she was the Director of Disability Services at Manhattan College. And Karen has spoken for us at these presentations before and can really share good information about what those services at college look like and what to be looking for in this people. And Richard Leroy has been in your shoes before. He has 3 Horace Greeley graduates, and he's going to be speaking about his experiences as a parent with students who are aging out and graduating. Andre Brandt is also supposed to be here, and he may come flying in at some point. Andre is the Access VR representative for our district. If Andre does not come, Carrie will be able to share some information about Access VR. Dawn, I want to thank you. You really worked very hard to pull this together. I know you and Christy were in constant contact for quite a long time now, really ensuring that this evening was going to be meaningful to our parents, and we know that it's volunteer work on your behalf, so I greatly appreciate that. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to turn it over to Christy.
So welcome everyone. Again, so nice to see so many familiar faces. I know you were here about, I guess it was a week ago, when we were discussing our transition process. So part of what I had discussed at the last time we had met was when the transition process begins for our students who are identified with the Committee on Special Education, which begins in 7th grade. So fast forward to 11th grade about, and I'd like to give an overview of what Horace Greeley has to offer in terms of supporting the process as your son or daughter moves forward in the planning stages of attending a 2 or 4-year college. So I did meet with our counseling department, and I learned, again, this is only a 1.5 years here, so through this process I too learned a lot of new information that I think all of you will find very helpful. So I first want to start off, starting with your beginning the fall semester of your junior year, The counseling department connects with the director of college admissions and invites him or her to come to Horace Greeley High School and present to both students and their families. At that meeting, they call it a kickoff meeting, where the admissions director really talks about the entire process and what to expect, and some questions to ask for as you move forward in your process. After that kickoff meeting, junior groups begin, which is typically starting in mid to end November. It's a six-week course of study. The course of study is on Canvas, so if you ask your son or daughter for their Canvas password, you will be able to access the entire curriculum that the counseling department has put together. Part of this 6-week course, the topics that are followed are how do you make a list of colleges, how to use Naviance, which is a software, it's a college data tracking system, review teacher recommendations, identifying the most important factors in admissions, and also discusses some test optional schools, which means that SATs and ACTs are not necessarily required as part of the admissions process. That is not inclusive of everything that's taught within the six-week course, but those are just some highlights of what is discussed. At the end of the six-week course, your child will fill out a questionnaire, and it comes in the form of about a 4 to 5 page packet. In that questionnaire, it'll include questions such as thoughts for a major of study, parts of the country where they would like to go to school. They hand this questionnaire back in to their counselor. The transcript is reviewed by the counselor, and then an hour-long family meeting is scheduled with your son or daughter's counselor. That meeting, Rebecca had shared, about 60 to 70% of our families do take that opportunity to meet with their counselor. It's with your child and the family members that are involved. At that meeting, that packet of questionnaires are reviewed. Courses for senior year are discussed. Teacher recommendations, who do you ask? What year should I ask? What year? Was it my 9th grade teacher, my 10th grade teacher, my current teachers? Those conversations are taking place. Discussion of college choices. For students who have a case manager, there many times will be the opportunity where your counselor will have already reached out to the student's case manager. It may be their junior year case manager, maybe their sophomore year case manager, to really identify what types of supports he or she thinks your son or daughter may need as they move forward into the college process. Testing accommodations are also part of that conversation that take place at the family meeting. Testing accommodations, again, will be determined, and I know that question will come up on our panel a little later on, but that will be discussed. How do you apply for testing accommodations? What kind of supports are your son or daughter going to require as they move forward into the college process? Who are they going to contact? What's the department called at the college? Every college has a different title for themselves, but those are all components that are discussed at that time. There are different leveling degrees of how much support your son or daughter will need. So those parent-family meetings may look very different. If friends, peers are talking from one peer to the next, those family conversations will look different. We may have one student who needs a fully supportive special education program as they move forward into college, and then we may have another student who may just require some testing accommodations. So that level and degree of the types of supports that are required are going to vary based upon who your child is as a learner. There's also, at that conversation with your counselor, there are times where students may not share that they have an IEP or a 504 in the application process. The school will not share that information. That will be a family decision and a family choice and student choice. There are some schools that are special education supported colleges, so it will be known when you're applying to a specific college that he or she may have an IEP. But that is not a requirement that you have to share that your son or daughter has an IEP or a 504 plan. I'm jumping a little bit. For students that have an IEP during your senior year, we have an annual review, also called a student exit summary meeting. And at that meeting, we're really reviewing how the senior year went, and what kind of accommodations and modifications are going to be required as you move on towards your college experience, if that's where the student chooses to attend 2 or 4-year college. That student exit summary form, which you will receive a copy of in the mail, your child can bring that student, I call it the SES form for short, another acronym to add to the list that you're already aware of, can bring this SES form to your college, to the Disabilities department, that will give an overview of the testing accommodations and program modifications that the student may still require, along with all the updated levels and abilities. So that will come during your senior year for those students who have an IEP. The other components that take place, I'm going to move to senior year. During first quarter, senior groups happen. At this time, counselors are ensuring that your children know what schools they're going to be applying to. If there are questions, there will be questions, and there are high-reach schools, some safe schools. That will all be part of that conversation that you have with your child's counselor. And that will be confirmed during your senior year, the fall senior year. Overview, when you look at the year, first quarters are senior group meetings, second quarter freshman meet, third quarter are juniors, and fourth quarter are sophomores. So this way, when you look at a year at a glance, your senior during your first quarter have the opportunity to ensure that their college applications are ready to go. Third quarter is when that your 6 weeks course of study takes place and family meetings begin. Family meetings begin typically February, March, and April during your junior year. What was new this year, which I was unaware of but did learn about it as well, was that there was a college application drop-in clinic that was added this year. It's during every day 6 of the fall semester. Students can come to this drop-in clinic with their college application. They meet with any counselor that's available at that time, and they can receive support in filling out the application. It may be a quick question, and then they leave. They may stay to help fill out their application process. From what I was informed, this was quite successful. It was very much utilized, and sounds like it will be continuing as we move forward to next year. As always, and this has always been clarified with counselors too and reiterated, the conversations and the planning process is very specific to your child. So although I provided an overview of what happens during junior and senior year, those family meetings and those specific recommendations in terms of the college supports and how much support or not needs, just the testing accommodations, as I mentioned before, will vary amongst each of your children. Some of you have lived through this process already. Some of you, the process is new. So it is very important to have an open line of communication with your child's counselor and also the case manager as you move forward in this process. Okay. So what I'd like to do now, sorry.
I just want to introduce Andre, who came in. Andre Grant, he's the Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor for Access VR, previously known as VESID. You may have heard it as VESID. So Andre will, after Kerry, Andre will be sharing with you about Access VR. I also wanted to introduce Dr. Gail Schlinger. Maybe some of you know her, but Gail is the department chair of Horace Greeley's Special Education Department. And so thank you for being here tonight, but also just know that nothing is done in a vacuum. So the special education teachers are working with the school counselors and the families in really helping shape the choices that your children make. So with that, Carrie McKenna will speak to you about the different types of college options, right?
Talk about what I want. I'm going to stand up because I can project better and I can move around. And this is just for a time. I'm not expecting a phone call. So I will talk about when you think about graduation and leaving high school, there are lots of options. But generally, again, most students, general ed, special ed, think about going to college. One of the things that and actually when I work with some principals and stuff, it's like we kind of say stop using the word college and use the word post-secondary. Because post-secondary is a broader palette. So what I'm going to talk about are post-secondary options, which college is one of them. So I had a handout that looked like this over on the table over there. This is kind of my guide, and I'll use it. I'm going to go off on some rants, but I also will respect the time. Most important thing, regardless of which one of these options you were to dance into, or not you, but your child student, would be self-knowledge. That is probably the most important asset, and that's the most important tool they can go away to school with. I'm going to talk at the end about some tools that might be out there to kind of stimulate discussion about it, and also kind of just like where is that student strong, and what skills might they need reinforcement and development before they go into college, or whether they might need support in a college setting. So I'll talk about that towards the end. So I'm going to really just run down a list of when we say post-secondary. So I'm thinking generally 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, certificate programs, and again I'll explain these more, proprietary schools, or what we used to call trade schools. Think college, which is kind of a newer movement, more focused on students with intellectual disabilities, but I want to talk about a little bit because again there's some interesting twists there that we're starting to see kind of go back and forth between the general ed and special ed population. I'm going to talk a little bit about gap year. There'll be a lot more information about that coming from one of the parents who has kind of gone through this. So I'll kind of give that overview and some of my thoughts, but he will give much more information. I'm going to talk a little bit about that tool, the post-secondary readiness rubric, and some college visits. And my list kept growing as this, I did this, and then I kept thinking, oh, I got to add this, I got to add this stuff. 2-year. Community college, the famous community college. Some students refer to it as grade 15, which really is not fair, but oftentimes it has had a kind of like a negative connotation. What we are seeing more and more, and this is in general ed as well as special ed, and really it's a lot in general ed, is for students who don't know what their next step is, but they all know they need more of something. No one's ready for the world when you graduate from high school. I don't care how good a high school you are, you're not ready for the world. So they know they need something. For those students where they have they have their diploma, they got their they kind of know that they got to do something. Community college is a great place to begin that sorting out process. So it is a great source for that. So it's the beginning of a 4-year program. Or, you can get an associate's degree after 2 years and be ready for the world of work at more than an entry level. You can go in with high-level skills and continue your education later. So that's the traditional community colleges. There are some private schools, Eastwicks in New Jersey. I'm using that New Jersey reference, but some of the private trade schools have now evolved into offering associate's degrees and even bachelor's degrees. So the best ones are public. The reason being is those credits transfer freely throughout the SUNY system, and generally those credits will also be accepted by private, not-for-profit colleges. So it's a great starting place. The notes I have here in terms of where to find information, I indicate the SUNY website is excellent, but there's notes about how to go through it. The CUNY system, I know we live in Westchester and above the city line, but the CUNY system has some really phenomenal programs, and it is a public institution, and for the most part we can access it like SUNY. And a lot of times when you're looking for maybe a program that is not super popular, it's only offered at a smaller variety of schools, the CUNY system is huge. And within their system, they offer a lot of majors that are kind of low incidence. So I don't want and again, going to Queens and Brooklyn might be tough, but Bronx and Manhattan really aren't that hard to get to, and there's some excellent schools that have those like kind of low incidence programs, FedTech, stuff like that. Ones that you kind of go, I know they're out there, and that's a more affordable tuition than going to the proprietary trade schools potentially. So the 2-year college, the community college is a great starting place for a lot of students. Obviously, there is the 4-year college, the one that we know and love, that most of us all went to, and You know, I went to a whole bunch of them actually. I didn't have a great start, neither did my son. I bounced through a couple, and he started off great, Christopher, and he was gung-ho, going to the great school. Everyone said he was ready, and he was home in June. So, no, he was home in January, not June. June would have been great. He was home in January. So we got, we kind of, reassessed what we're doing. Kind of pulled him back home, got him into a local school, and kind of rebuilt him. And he graduated fine. He's doing very well. He moved on, stuff like that. But my message there is, getting into the four-year college doesn't mean you're ready for four-year college. And we there's this message that we think is like this. And I think from a kid's, the student's point of view, it's like, oh, look at them. They are a wonderful institution of learning, and they want me. I must be ready. It doesn't work like that. Okay? Let's just get that off the table. I mean, getting accepted into college means you got accepted into college. So, four-year colleges, for the most part, I mean, there might be some that have associate degrees along the way, but generally, four-year is going in for your BA. Now, in the case of the 2 and the 4-year, one thing I want to stress now rather than later is the number 2 and a number 4 are just kind of descriptors. They're not contracts. You don't have to complete a 2-year program in 2 years, nor do you have to complete a 4-year program in 4 years. For students with disabilities, though it may cost more money to do an extra year or so, it may be best to look at stretching it out from the beginning, which means don't take a full semester of all-powerful courses all at once. Take 2. And if you got to retain your full-time status for financial aid, put some funky electives in there you like. Take theater, take dance. But also, and it may want 2 things happen. One, it stretches out the work and takes a little bit of pressure off. Second thing is the student may develop a minor in if these elective courses actually are constructed in a way that is, strung together. I know it costs more money, but ultimately we want success. And some strategies from the start, which may ensure success, is a better investment than crashing and burning and rebuilding. So just 2 and 4-year are numbers for descriptive purposes. In the perfect world, that's what you do. If you take 3 years for a 2-year college, it's okay, as long as you're moving forward. And again, the moving forward part ties back to this thing I started with, self-knowledge, having a sense of why you're in these environments and how they can help you move forward for yourself. Certificate programs. These are little gems that are hidden. They're hidden in the SUNY system, they're hidden in the CUNY system. They are wonderful things. And that what they are is you don't really get a degree. They're shorter. Generally, they're anywhere from 6 months to a year, generally. They are focused on taking courses specific to developing a career. That certificate is usually recognized by industry, so it's not like this little thing like here's the college says, here's a certificate, you did a good job, bye-bye. You have to oftentimes take a test, tied to industry standards, but that certificate makes you hireable. So right off, so you can leave without going 2 years and start with a job in an area of interest and ability. A lot of the private schools are what you will see advertised. Again, I'm going to say I just don't know the ones in New York anymore. DeVry, all these other ones that have been out there. And the thing is, the community colleges have certificate programs, and they have very good ones. So if a student has let's say a student has a high level of interest in computer and technology, but the idea of going to college for a long time, or just that ability, not wanting to take history, I don't want to take all these other courses, a certificate program can get them started. If you take a certificate program at a SUNY school, and you decide, college really isn't that sucky, I think I'll stay in. Well, all those credits transfer in. So again, within the SUNY system, CUNY system, credits you take there for a certificate would be applicable to an associate's degree or ongoing for a 4-year. So that's the advantage of working within the SUNY CUNY system. You get those courses at, I'm going to say Eastwick, just forgive me, Eastwick. and you say, okay, I want to go to school. You're going to go to Eastwick, and they're going to say, you're going to go to the public school, and they're going to say, well, those credits don't mean anything to us. And we've had this happen to a bunch of students. So, you need to understand that a certificate program is a path. It brings you to a career more quickly. It is not an associate's degree. It is not a bachelor's degree. But if you take them at a public institution, they will be applied towards those degree programs if you choose to continue. So, again, it's like, you can kind of build these little blocks. Now I'm going to kind of jump off a little bit into proprietary schools, trade schools. Trade schools, where you learn a trade, very simply. They offer certificates, a lot of them, and again, industry-based standards. So the certificate you get, if you earn it, means you can go out and apply a job in that field and be recognized as having basic qualifications. They generally are for-profit institutions, so Lincoln Tech and all of those. So when you see the ads, and not they're bad, but just so you understand, they're for-profit institutions. And in reality, they do follow the business stuff that and the student loans and all that stuff. Generally, the enormously high rate of default on student loans is coming from proprietary trade schools. And a lot of it has to do with more that they sometimes are perceived as mills for processing students rather than institutes of higher education. Their goal is making money and pushing students through. Actually, my dad was involved. way, computers were in their infancy. It's a Programming Assistance Institute in Buffalo. And even then I wondered about those places. There was just something about it, just like, I don't know. So, there are good ones, but if you're going to do proprietary trade school route, I suggest you work with these folks over here at Access VR. They have a list of approved proprietary trade schools, which means ones at least that have kind of gone through their vetting process and do what they're supposed to do. So, if that was a route you're going to take, and in some instances, if I want to become a diesel mechanic, I'm going to proprietary trade school probably, because there's some of the SUNY schools offer them, maybe Morrisville, Delhi, a couple, but again, around here, they're the ones that offer that. So it is a viable alternative. I would encourage you that before you would jump into a proprietary school, that to see if any of the public school systems in the area looking to offer the same thing. It'll be cheaper, and I think that there is a higher degree of professionalism in those. That is a personal opinion on my part right now, but that's just my experience. Think College. Think College is a relatively new, I'm going to call it a movement for lack of a better term, probably about 8 years now in. And what Think College is actually, that refers to the organization that kind of manages and organizes the information about these. These are programs generally designed for students with intellectual disabilities. Students who are participating in these programs are not necessarily matriculating, but they participate fully in campus life. They live in the dorms, they can audit courses if that's appropriate. The programs will also offer career training and access to community like volunteer work. So it kind of looks like a gap year, but it's on a college campus. The goal generally is to lead that program with some type of career preparation. Generally it is not for earning an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. There is an important aspect about that is about Think College programs. This is specific to Think College. If that was something you follow, one of the questions you want to ask is, the acronym is CTP, Comprehensive Transition Program. The reason why that is, if they have that certification, the reason why it's important is that means that you can use the traditional financial aid system to help pay the cost of that program. If it doesn't have that, financial aid cannot be applied to it. If it has that, you can use your I'm going to call it the ABLE accounts or the 529s, those accounts that the families would do to build up for college. You can use those funds because it's considered to be an appropriate college program. So again, the Think College programs that are participating at have met specific standards and been granted that certified transition program status. And then again, so it allows access to financial aid, bank, student loans, and all that stuff like that. So that not all Think College programs have it. So that's important. If that was a path you're on and your student's on, something important to ask. Gap year, which means I'm not ready for anything. It is for many students the right next step. When they are still trying to sort out where and how they're going to fit into their community. It's like, where's my niche? And again, when you have a student with disability, that can be hard for a student without a disability. When you have a student with disability, I mean, there is a niche, but it can become more difficult to find. It can become more difficult to sort out, you know, where does I fit, where is that I don't fit? What kind of supports will I need to kind of be able to operate at my best? So the gap year, when it's done right, can really help the student kind of rebuild, regroup, and strengthen themselves to prepare to participate fully in college life. There are specific gap year programs designed for students with disabilities. So there's gap year, general ed, and then there's gap year for individuals with disabilities. And those programs have additional supports provided within the design of the program. So you know, they really are designed to be supportive and to kind of help that maturing process from being a high school graduate and you met the requirements and you did well, but kind of closing that gap between am I ready for college and to start kind of getting those skills ready. There's some great programs on there. I only mentioned two here. The only reason I mentioned it was because they're two distinct styles. One is the Thames program at the Mitchell College campus, been around for a while, and the other is Dyname Inc., which is in Worcester, Mass. The difference is the one is college-based. I mean, the students live on the college campus. It's a gap year, so they have the ability to interact with the college life, and probably I think they can even take some audit courses, stuff like that. The other, Dyname Inc., is an independent agency that interacts with a series of colleges and community organizations. So one is college-based, the other is all college-based. There's the list I told you pretty much what to type in the search engine. A whole bunch of lists are going to come up, and I put two lists there that I go to on a regular basis because I find that they're thorough and that they're reasonable. You know, those are two that I like. But you just type gap year program disability in your search engine, you will get a lot of hits. Some are specific to a program, others are going to be a compilation list of programs. Is that how I'm doing it? So, gap year. I think it's a really good alternative. Especially when it's a student, and I'm thinking I'm running through students in my head right now, and students who have the struggle to get out of high school, the struggle to succeed in the high school environment, the amount of energy and the amount of work it takes, you need a break sometimes. But you don't want a free-falling break either, something where it's like, you know, chaotic, and I'm going to go take a tour of Europe for a year. That's not what you need. But you get the opportunity to mature and also to break away, start breaking bonds. I mean, the idea of growing up is to break away. And the gap year can provide that first step where they don't have the pressure of having to perform in college and kind of meet all these other expectations and act like an adult and do all these other things you're supposed to do when you live away from home. So it gives the opportunity to start the breakaway process, learn how to do that, kind of refocus. I'll be fun fast. Refocus, and then move on the post-secondary options appropriate, whether it's 2 years, 4 years, or 3 years. So it really can be a beneficial thing, because, again, stop and think about the graduation for the general ed student is an anxiety-producing time. Well, take that, multiply it times 5, and that's what you have for the student with disability who has struggled to get this, to make this work, and now is expected to make that work. And that is really a big mystery up there right now. So it allows that, it allows time, and time is really a wonderful thing sometimes, to just really allow things to settle in, finish one task, graduate, start looking forward, and having time to mature and build your skills. The downside is they're expensive. They're expensive. So that's the downside. In running through this list, I'm going to do a couple of things. 2-year colleges, SAT is not required. Voc rehab potentially can help. 4-year college, SAT is required. Voc rehab can possibly help. Certificate programs, SAT is not required. Voc rehab can possibly help. Proprietary schools, SAT is not required. Voc rehab can possibly help. Think college, no SAT, no voc rehab. Gap year, no SAT, no voc rehab. A tool that I mentioned here at the end, post-secondary readiness rubric, emotional well-being. Now, I must admit I'm one of the authors on this. So, there is a certain bias to it, but, it is a research-based thing. Originally, we focused on getting into college. We switched it to getting out of college. What skills do you need to be able to get out of college and participate fully in the college experience? And we realized that probably the best indicator is emotional well-being. Not grades, not SAT scores, it's the student's emotional well-being. And so we built this rubric to assess the, for families, students, schools to look at that. It's a self-rating scale, and what it does, it allows you to look at series of skills and to really rate yourself. We think the language is clear. The feedback we've got is the language is a good descriptor, so you can say, yeah, this is where I'm at right now. And it allows you to identify the areas where the student is strong. You don't got to put more energy into the areas where the student requires more work, and it might be they need more experience and more growth. It might be that's the disability kicking in, and we got to make sure that support systems are built. It allows us to kind of identify where energy can go, where our energies can go to move it, really make sure the student has a skill set to succeed in college, not get in, to succeed in the college environment. The college visit hints, I'm not going to go down, this is going to take too much time. The one thing that's not on here, which I should have put, is take a college course before you graduate. Westchester Community College, you can spend time with with supportive guidance departments and kind of some finagling. Take what they call the college success course. We've had a bunch of students do this prior to graduation. And what it does is it gives them a taste of college on the college campus. And it's a course that's like what's called the freshman seminar course that a lot of freshmen have to take. It's about, okay, you're in college, guys, you've got to grow up, this is how the college works, this is how you write papers. That course can be taken, again, it's not like this wide open thing. It's been done a lot though, so it's not, I'm not telling you something that is impossible. But if a student can arrange to take the course prior to going to college, they learn to get it's a wake-up call. And I already mentioned about the course load, stretching it out. And the other thing is, if a student has a disability and requires supports, and they're going to a post-secondary situation, accessing community-based supports and learning how to access those is really important. So if they're not living at home and they're going away and they have mental health needs, where's the mental health support coming in? That's not always going to come from the college campus. So what are the local what would a student do in the event that they needed help? Student with eating disorders, what would they do if they needed help? Is there a local chapter of the organization to provide support? So those are kind of background things that aren't necessarily part of the visit, but they're definitely part of the college planning process. I will stop.
So can everybody see me? Yeah. It's hard in the back maybe. I have a 2-year-old at home. Both me and my wife are sleep deprived, but here we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit from experience. I work with, through my 15 years, I've worked with thousands of transitional students through the years. So I often reflect on my experiences with regards to, the college supports and things like that. First and foremost, for us, we're a vocational agency, right? This was something I could relate a little bit from my Norwegian background. I'm originally from Norway. So what we do is we look towards a career, we look towards a vocational goal. So the goal for us is not to support someone to college, it's to support someone for a specific job that they want to do, and this is why they're going to college. We want to try to develop that goal, before we start a college plan with the person, right? Again, this thing with supports is so critical that they have supports, and that's what I've learned from my experience. When you talk about maybe a psychiatric disability, or maybe you're on the spectrum, maybe you struggle a little bit with regards to interpersonal skills, soft skills, to have counseling services available to you if you decide to go away from college is very important, because you want that student to succeed, and unless they feel support on that campus, my experience is often they won't do as well as they could have done if they had those supports on campus available to them. I know that with regards to the psychologicals and also the exit the ones that the IEPs say, get recommendations, right? That they're going to be getting, obviously, when they go to college. We also do psychologicals through my agency, where we'll outline the accommodations for a student. They really can be, there's so many, different accommodations that a student can get. I mean, there's obviously one extended testing time, copy of notes and things like that. There's a whole list of accommodations that a student can receive. Also with regards to, one thing I wanted to bring up was this thing with regards to the time that it takes to get a college degree. I think the most important thing is that there's a plan, there's a structure, a curriculum towards a specific vocational goal. That's how I view things. But as far as the time goes, the course load can be an accommodation in itself. I have students that don't necessarily start off taking a full course load. They might take a part-time course load. And for some students that work. And that to me is a good plan for someone that by reducing that course load, they get better grades, better GPA, and they're able to work, progressively towards that goal. Than if someone that comes in and just maybe registers for 18, 15 credits and gets easily overwhelmed. So you want to assess that. That's important. Let's see. Okay. So, you have to, I don't know how much you want to get into the colleges thing, but you have the 2-year schools, which I've seen as have become more sort of geared towards like technical jobs. I've seen like a Mooresville, Delhi, auto mechanic, and different other technical fields. What we do with our plans is that, and I'll use an example. For example, someone comes in and the person wants to be an architect, right? That person could maybe start at a Mooresville and get 2 technical associate's degrees, then go on to Buffalo and get a degree in architecture. Because it becomes practical, right? What we would do in a case like that is we would set the vocational goal based on a 2-year degree for that degree that person is getting initially. Even with the understanding that they're going to pursue maybe to become an architect, right? But we always set it at the degree. So if it's a 2-year degree, that'll be the vocational goal based on that 2-year degree. If they go on to the 4-year school, that becomes the vocational goal. If the vocational title requires a graduate degree, you can request a waiver, and we can sponsor somebody for a graduate degree as well, if that specific vocational title requires that you have a graduate degree. Some things are based on financial needs, some things are not. I know you mentioned some specific colleges with regards to learning disability programs, right? New York State Ed is on contract with various colleges where that wouldn't be dependent on economic need. That means that, I think it's Mercer College, Manhattanville, Hofstra. There's 4 different schools that are on contract with us, so we would pay for that program, right? And you also can request if there's a specific program for, that for the student's specific disability, and this is something that really, you can advocate for that. I've seen that happen on agencies where that's been approved. That is not financially needed based. If the student receives SSI, then you automatically qualify for one degree, right? because no matter what the income is of the family. But other than that, we do look at something like a 1040. If the student is being claimed as a dependent on that tax form, we will look at that. And you have to meet the economic need for things like tuition, fees, books, dorms, and things like that. Okay? So that is based on economic need. Let's see, what else?
Can you talk, Andre, about who's eligible for services through SSVR and how they access it?
Yep. Anybody who has like a disability with functional limitations, right? It could be a psychological, it could be a physical disability, you know, it could be like, you know, the way that it gets classified as other health impairment, if it's a psychological, depression, anxiety, etc. Or it could be based on a learning disability. That also qualifies you for services. It doesn't necessarily have to be an IEP. It could be a 504. It could be a physical disability. Students with various physical disabilities. You know, it could be Crohn's, it could be MS, it could be any of these disabilities that affects, you know, your major sort of functions in life, right? That may mean that you qualify. So with that, when you come in, that qualifies you for services. And I don't know, Christy, if you're the contact person for us here, right, at the school? All right, so the student would obviously come to you, right, through the guidance counselor?
It starts with the school counselor. The school counselors, just turn around like I speak. In the counseling department, in collaboration with your child's case manager, there's a conversation that may take place with you and or with the student. An application for Access VR is handed. Typically, it's been to the parents. There are many times where the parents have been directly mailing it right to you. There has also been times where some parents want to hand it to me first for review, and then through my office we send it in for that as well. So typically what we've been working is 2 years before the year of graduation.
So you're talking more IEPs than 504s because 504s don't have case managers.
So it's still the same process with the school, with your child's school counselor.
We never received anything like that. My kid's a senior.
Yeah, so it depends on if that would be a conversation with the counselor. For this year, I can't speak to the past, so I can only speak to this year. We did put in that process where an application could be received, and you have them right in the counseling department. I also have them as well,
Right.
where you can fill that out. And then again, it can be sent directly to Andre. His contact information is there, or they are sent to me. And then typically, once the application gets to Andre, if there's something missing, he'll contact me. It has been contacting me. And I've either have called the parent. It hasn't happened a lot, but there are times where something will be missing. We've taken care of it, got that piece of paperwork in on behalf of the parents and talked them through that a little bit. And then other times, Christy, we've already met with Andre, we're all set, we're ready to go. So again, there's different levels of support for that. But that's typically, and that we just put into place for this year, that process. So that would.
And generally, we're very involved with the disability services on the various campuses across the state, right? So we work with them. One thing that I've learned through my years is that sometimes young individuals are not good at advocating for themselves, right? So it's very important that they make that good connection with disability, someone in that disability services office that they can work with, that they feel comfortable with, right? That's very important that gets established, and we assist with that. We also help with things like tutoring sometimes. If the college doesn't provide tutoring due to difficulties with the student's schedule or a certain subject and things like that, we get involved in that. And we provide funding for tutoring, right? So we're kind of like a second sort of, funding source usually. If that doesn't happen with the college, then we can step in and we can help out with that. So it's sort of like a working relationship with the Office of Student Disability. That's something that the voc counselor will have contact with each single one of those disability services offices that their specific students, where they're attending college. One thing that also that I think is very important is that, I work with a number of students through the years that are on the spectrum, right? So everybody's going to have strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes really our focus, I feel, has become more on working on the weaknesses. So what I like to do with pretty much all the students that I have I have someone that works with them sort of with regards to job coaching, but not placement related, right? So what that means is that, every week, usually there's somebody works with them for at least an hour with regards to organizational skills, planning, planning out what the schoolwork is going to be done for the next week. I find this is very important, and I also find it's important that they get sort of someone works with them with regards to those interpersonal skills. Because I've had students that might, in the past been strong academically, but that's only part of it. Going through college and getting a degree, that's only part of it. So, let's say if there's a weakness there with interpersonal skills, you want to utilize those 2 to 4 years, whatever how long it is, so that student gets someone to work with during those years and to improve the areas where they're weak.
The location, you can just speak to, are they local, do they have to be in New York?
No, yeah. I don't want to say something that's funny. You can go to a school in Hawaii. I don't know if you can go to school in London, or you can go to school in Hawaii, but it doesn't matter where you go, right? You're still getting services through the VR system in New York. So I have several students that go to college all across the country and really go wherever they want to go. But there's a limit with regards to, with the economic need that I discussed, not necessarily with the learning disability programs, we can fund those aren't economic need based. But we can only fund if the economic need is there and the eligibility is there for that, then we can only fund up till the SUNY rate, right? And that's a big difference, right? Because if you look at SUNY, maybe it's like $270 credit. On a private school, it could be like $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 in credit, right? So it's a big difference. So the student has an option to go to the private school, but we will only fund up until the highest SUNY rate.
Andre, if I could say something, I was at one of the many seminars I go to on college prep, and I was sitting with a group of educators from Rockland, and they said the second they have an 11th grade special ed student, they have them sign up for Access VR, because you all do so many things like vocational coaching and the welcome services they offer. So I think maybe that's just not familiar to our school system, to our folks now, but we'll get brochures to everybody. It's Access 1S VR.
Well, I think there's been a lot of misinformation out there about the agency, right? So,
Yeah, I thought you were New York only. So.
Yeah, no, it's too much into different things. But you can definitely go attend training, even vocational training, like at a different state. It's really with the understanding that, once you're educated, and then you go out, we help you, there's the job placement part of this too, right? So after you've received a college education, our focus then is geared towards the placement, because that's why we wanted to assist with the college in the first place, so you can get a job that meets your needs. That's really what we're focused on. But, if you decide that you want to go to Penn State for that, or another college out of state, then we're all supportive of that. And the idea is that, you're going to come back to New York State and work here. But, with the free tuition in New York State, we don't have as many strings attached. So we're hoping that you're going to continue to stay. But if you decide to leave, we're not going to say, okay, now we'd like the funding that we provided for you back. I mean, it doesn't work that way. Yep.
Although I'd be curious, I don't see. I'm just walking other people through the process as I talk about this. You fill out the application, which is what we did. We submitted it, or actually the school submitted it for us. You sent the letter to my son, it was addressed to him, not to me, it was to him to come in for the interview, which he did. He came with him, but I came with him as parent interpreter. And then we had a very successful meeting. What's next? Because that's where I'm at that
Good
point.
question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the referral material that I got from the school, right? And if that has what I need, then that's good. What I would do is if it didn't, then which is not the case with I've experienced up with the school district. But then I'm going to make referrals for evaluations myself. We do psychological evaluations with the violent, depending on the disability, we do this testing ourselves. If there is accommodations that is needed and they aren't outlined with regards to the paperwork that comes to the school, we can always do further testing to justify additional accommodations. So really what I'm saying is that if all the referral material that I got suffices, and at the top of my head here, I don't know exactly what the plan
We had a
is.
very Scandinavian conversation.
Oh, we do? Oh, yeah. No, I know. You got a Scandinavian background, now.
Yes.
So what it is that it's a transitional service, right? What that means is that when the student is in the district, during those school hours, those are really, those are his school hours in the district. We're not involved during those hours. So my job here is to develop a good transitional plan for your son. And if there's additional testing that needs to be done, then I will ask if that's something that you're comfortable with, and we'll make the referral for specific testing. But in this case, I have all the paperwork that I need, so we are developing a plan for him. And before that, anything gets finalized, it gets discussed with you and with him. And if we all parties agree on the plan, then we move on. So you will hear from us. For sure.
Just nervous.
No. Any additional questions, Wendy? No? Thank you.
So I'm just going to go through and ask a series of questions for our panel members. And so if there's anything you can slow down or continue, I'll try to look at their facial expressions as they move forward, so I'll move myself. So in addition to the two presentations, what do you think are the key things parents and students should think about when selecting colleges to visit?
Okay, I will kick off on this, but first I want to thank you for inviting me, the organizers of the program, and thank you all for coming. When I look at these questions, each one of them could be an evening. So I'm going to try to be brief and give an overview, and there is obviously a lot of overlap among the questions. So one of my handouts that says services to students with learning disabilities and special needs does talk what's going to be this question and another question about relative support that Karen will also speak to. In the introduction were important qualifications that were omitted, so I just want to give some full disclosure about that. I'm also a parent of two young men with ADD, and very proud grandmother of a student with autism. So I have been where you have been, and I have done what you need to do. And that's why, although I work with students at all different levels of ability, this has sort of become a subspecialty of mine. There's also a book out there, a K&W Guide to Colleges and Services. And I'm sorry?
The book? I didn't hear what
The K&W Guide, the book is right out there on the table. And this was put together by Mary Beth Kravitz and Amy Wax. That's the K&W. And I know Mary Beth very well, and I've met Amy a couple of times. And I'm saying this because these were parents of kids with learning differences going back probably 30 years ago who could not get information. And Mary Beth was a school counselor at a very prestigious high school in the Midwest. And the two of them took it upon themselves to visit schools and look at the different services. And originally self-published the book. Then it was taken over by print review. So if you're going to buy any book, that's one I recommend, with the caveat that books are obsolete as soon as they're published. But it will give you a lot of information. In addition to what's been said, the things that you should look at, most specifically when selecting a college. First of all, no one, whether you have special needs or not, should visit a school without doing some research first. So you don't go to a school and then ask if they have services, for example. You want to know that before you go in. The point I can't stress enough is make sure when you plan a college visit. Okay. Are you having trouble hearing me?
Yes.
Nobody's ever accused me of being soft-spoken before.
There's a buzzing going on.
There's a drilling noise. This is better? Okay. when you work with your wonderful counseling department and your special ed department here, you will learn a lot through this workshop series about college visits in general. But what I was going to say to you, and this I think is the most important factor, when you visit a college, make sure you make an appointment before you get there to visit whomever is in charge of services for students with whatever kind of special needs your kids have. Now, these offices vary in names, and the person varies in names from college to college. Sometimes it's called Academic Support Center. Sometimes it's called Office of Students with Disabilities, my least favorite title. But just ask who is in charge of students who have whatever it is, learning needs, testing accommodations. You learned in high school the difference between support and accommodations, and it really carries through that difference into college. So make an appointment with that person. Be armed with the questions you want to ask. Some of them I've put on this sheet, this handout sheet, and additional questions that I would ask you to think about when selecting colleges to visit. Carrie very rightly mentioned that, and you know this by now, some kids with special needs just need more time. And I don't mean more time to take tests, more time to mature, more time to become independent, more time to learn how to organize themselves and all of that. So when he says that a 2-year program or a 4-year program doesn't have to be that time constraint, I'm going to add to that by asking schools what their policies are, for example, regarding taking summer courses. My own son quickly learned that he couldn't handle 5 classes, which he would have had to do in order to graduate in a 5-year time frame. What he chose to do, and his college allowed him to do, my oldest son's college did not allow this, was to take summer classes. And it was his choice. I didn't care about the 5th year. My husband really cared about the 5th year. I didn't care about the 5th year, but he graduated in a 4-year period of time, and they were 12-month years. So he took 2 classes every summer so that he could graduate within a 4-year time. You might want to know the college's stance on that. The other thing that you should know when planning college visits is you need to know your child. That sounds so stupid and so basic, but you need to know and truly understand what your son or daughter's learning needs are. And things that he or she may not understand, like the need for supervision, like use of what I'm going to call unstructured time. And I'm going to just vary my pronouns a little bit, but your kids don't even realize the degree of support that they're getting, and you may not even realize it yourselves. Trust me, when your son goes back to his dorm, his roommate is not going to say, "Have you done your homework?" Her roommate is not going to say, "What did you get on that last test?" You may not hear, now I'm sure, if your child is doing poorly, you're going to hear from in a subject, you're going to hear from the teacher. You probably have a close relationship with the special ed teacher assigned to your child. If your child is doing poorly in a lot of subjects, you're going to hear from the school counselor. None of that is going to happen unless your child really needs it and you make sure that it's in place. Because it is not in place at a lot of places that even have comprehensive programs. The other thing you need to understand, so they don't know they've got you on their cases and they don't like it all the time, but they really appreciate it because they know if it wasn't there, things wouldn't work out the way they needed to work out. They have teachers looking after them. They have special ed teachers looking after them. They have counselors looking at them. All of that is going to disappear unless you think your child needs it. The other really important thing is make sure she knows what her learning issues are. As a counselor, I always say to kids, one of the first questions I ask when they tell me they've got an IEP or a 504 or go to a resource room or whatever it's called, I work with kids in different states and different schools, I say, what is your learning disability? And I think you know the most common answer right now. The shrug and They need to know. They need to really understand. Because one of the things about college is they've got to acquire the self-advocacy needs that they're going to need throughout their lives. Okay? My son will still sometimes text me about the spelling of a certain word because he doesn't want in his business to get it wrong. And it's easier to text me than to look it up. So that leads me to the next thing I'm going to advise you on college campuses. When your child turns 18, you're paying a lot of money for college tuition. You are paying, you're supporting this child, and you have absolutely no right to access her academic information. They cannot talk to you once your child turns 18. So some schools will ask the child to sign a waiver saying we may communicate with your parents. So I gave my son a choice. I said, you don't have to sign this if you don't want to, but if you don't sign this, you're going to have to come up with $45,000. He signed the paper. Now, I'm not advising you to become helicopter parents or to become nuisances, but you've known for a long time that kids with special needs need special attention. And you want to prevent a situation from becoming really unfortunate. So that communication, keeping in touch, I think is very important. And again, that depends on your child. When I traveled on college tours with my older child, and the person doing the presentation came down into the audience to give me a kiss, he decided that he was going to visit schools with his father from then on. My younger child wanted me to wear a sign that, said who I was and where I worked. Wanted to use that as a factor. But what I'm saying to you is know what your kid wants and what you need. And you don't want to wait until final grades, which is the only thing that happens. You're not going to get progress reports in college. You don't want to wait until final grades to find out that this child has failed this course or getting a D or will be winding up on academic probation. You want to monitor that situation. And you want to ease that off as your child matures and goes through college. So this is some of the kinds of research that you should be doing before you visit a college. You're going to come up with appropriate lists with your counselors. You're going to fall in love with Naviance. And I'm computer illiterate. It's my favorite piece of software. You'll find out on Naviance about comprehensive programs. And then you'll learn, Karen will talk about this as well, that they're not all what they seem to be. So that's why you'd be armed with very, very specific questions. Some schools, by the way, won't charge for that 5th year or that 7th semester. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll get back to some of the questions.
So it leads into, Karen, I think this leads nicely into the next question. Are you looking at what are the different levels of support that families might look for, basic accommodations, enhanced support, comprehensive programs?
Yeah, as part of that research that you're doing, you want to be looking at thinking about your child and what their needs are, what level of support they need, and then asking the question of the colleges, what level of support are you going to offer? Every college has to offer basic accommodations free of charge. Whether it's a big college that has a large accessibility office with 10 staff, or whether it's a half a person's job to do accommodations on a teeny tiny campus, there is someone at every campus that is responsible for assessing your students' needs if they come forward and say that they have a need for accommodations, and assigning those accommodations. So any college is going to be able to give you those basics. What those basics look like, what those accommodations are going to be very individual to your specific needs. But any college can do basic accommodations. Then there's another level of what I call enhanced programs, and these are colleges that offer a little something extra. Most often, those are fee-based programs. So we're going to talk about, I think, some examples of that, but these are programs that might offer extra academic support, maybe extra support in counseling, maybe extra support in executive function skills. It really is going to vary based on whatever they offer. Some do a little bit of everything, but these are going to be largely fee-based programs that you buy into for a semester or for a year at a time to get a little extra support on top of whatever the college might already offer. The colleges may already have a basic counseling center, they already have some basic tutoring or peer tutoring, but these are usually a higher level of support by professionals that you're buying into. Then there are, as Barbara mentioned, comprehensive programs. These are going to be programs that cover everything, and it might be a specific college for disabilities where everything is infused with support and accommodation, or it may be a program that is specific to a disability. We've got, for example, the OASIS program at PACE in the city, which is specifically for people with autism. And it's academic support, it's counseling, it's support in the residential sector, and it's comprehensive looking at everything. Whereas when you look at the enhanced supports, they're just going to usually target one or two areas of the campus life for the individual. So thinking about how much support, because they are getting a ton of support here. It's a wonderful program. It's so great that they're getting everything that they're getting here. And I will just say from my own experience in Manhattanville, when I received Greeley students, they were more prepared than the average student that I received. That being said, it's a big drop-off in level of support and what's available to you in terms of people watching you, people checking on you, people kind of keeping track of what's going on. So thinking about how much of that does your child use right now? And will they continue to need that level going forward? And might one of these enhanced programs be enough for them? Might basic accommodations be enough? Or do they really need the highest level of support where there's a lot more eyes on in a comprehensive program? So those are kind of the three levels. And so when you're thinking about what level of support you might need, that's going to sort of narrow or widen your list of possibilities, because while there are a lot of these enhanced programs out there and there are a small number of comprehensive programs, there's certainly more growing each year, but it's going to take your list from 100 to 15 really quickly. Once you start to think about what level of support and which schools might offer that are within the catchment area you're thinking about, that are offering the majors you're thinking about, and you're putting all those pieces together. I think it's really also important when you're thinking about which colleges, is it's wonderful if you find a college that has that exact support level you're thinking about and offers the exact match, but you have to really think about the curriculum and the program they're offering. Manhattanville is an example. It's a liberal arts college, which means you have to take a little bit of everything. That's not great for everybody. It's a heavy writing school. So yeah, they have a wonderful enhanced program that you can buy into, but no matter how much you get out of that program, if the curriculum is not a match or the type of program is not a match, it's not going to be enough. It's not going to be a match. So you want to be thinking about not just that level of support, but what is that college offering in terms of just the program, and is that also a match for them? Do you want to speak to some examples of some of the enhanced and comprehensive?
Certainly. While there are those three main areas, understand that there's a broad spectrum within each one of those areas. So, for example, how does the student get support? Does that have to be student initiative? Is there a learning specialist or a learning center that informs the professors? This was very important for my kid because he didn't want to be the one that approached me. the professors. So there are different programs, and I'm going to give you some specific schools just to show you the difference of programs. I'm not advertising schools here, and because it all depends, it's very specific to the needs of your child. So, for example, there are lots of programs, and I just want to elaborate first on something Karen said. They don't really have to provide the services, but if they don't, then they have to test your child. And I've never encountered a college that was willing to do that. The other thing that, yes?
I have a question. I'm just going through my timeline of everything. And you just said the testing, but if they have an IEP from their senior year, let's say, and they have something spelled out, a summary of what the child needs, can they go, once they get into the college that they think is a good fit for them, then they go to the academic support program? And then what if, and then you're saying if they don't have to provide it, but then what if you have the IEP summary?
Let me answer that because
Okay.
There's a lot in there.
I said that
I know, I'm
very
just-
technical.
Yeah.
But you also need to know that college professors are very independent creatures. And some are more open to providing the accommodations even if they are mandated. When it gets to college, forget about the words IEP. IEPs expire upon high school graduation. IEPs have no relevance to college.
The same with
So-
504s?
I'm sorry?
The same with 504s?
Yes. So when,
Can I just quantify it?
yes.
It's not that they don't have relevance. They're important historical documents, but they do not document a disability. So they're just something nice to have to show what a student got before. But they do not then get repeated or copied at the college.
Not just to show, but to prove also.
What Christy was saying when you outline what the counseling department does, in the exit conference or whatever way it's done, what's issued is a 504. What a 504 is, it's a section of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act.
So student exit summary is issued for students with IEPs. It's a document for the student exit.
Right, but what it really is, it's a 504 plan. I'd say whatever the school specific calls it, it's a 504 plan, which again goes under ADA and will follow your child through college and sometimes beyond. But if that 504 plan or the document that you're talking about is in place, what's the timeline? The timeline is a later question about disclosure. And that really depends on the individual child. In general, I'm going to recommend, and it's a general recommendation, that you disclose when you're applying to school. Because sometimes that explains some discrepancies in the transcript, or explains a difference between, for example, grades and standardized testing. If your child is applying to a comprehensive program, which is an additional fee, sometimes it can range from about $2,000 to about $5,000. And the other part is check your health insurance. Some health plans will cover that fee. But comprehensive programs require a separate application. I've had students accepted into a college and not accepted into a comprehensive program. So that can happen as well. Okay? Some specific programs. Lynn University has some wonderful programs for students with ADD and executive functions. Most colleges have great programs for learning disabilities. All colleges, and I think Karen said this, offer academic support to all students. There's usually a writing center, there's also usually a tutoring center available to all students. But Lynn has a specific program for kids with ADD and executive functioning. They will actually have some courses that are taught by learning specialists. And what they do is modules, because many of these kids just can't absorb a semester's worth of work and put it down on a 3 or 4, or with extended time, 5 or 6 hour test. So they'll do module testing. And as with any good program, they do decrease the services that the student needs. They offer many different kinds of free tutoring, and they tailor the support for your students' needs. Hofstra University, I think you mentioned that as well, it has the same kind of menu of different services depending on the student's needs. Their SAS program is the umbrella student access services. They will determine, they'll look at the documentation, they'll look at whatever testing you want to provide. They will determine the level of support that your child needs. Their PALS program, which is a program for academic learning, is their most comprehensive program. They have an academic coaching program. This is their most expensive one. They deal with not just academic issues, because for all kids, I don't care if they have special needs or not, that first semester of college is very, very challenging. Dealing with the unstructured time. Colleges have, on the average, about 3 hours of in-class time. And kids add that up into, that's 15 hours of instruction. And then they think about how many courses they're taking here at Greeley and how long their school may go. Oh, that's no big deal. But of course, for every hour of instruction, the expectation is another 2 hours of out-of-class work. So that 15 hours is now 45 hours. And that's for kids who don't have special needs. So they have to learn how to handle that. And Hofstra's academic coaching program works on social adjustment, time management, problem solving, coping with stress, test prep, test anxiety, strategies, all of these kinds of skills that will enable them to be successful in courses, not just the academic piece of it. Dean College has a program called their ARCH program. And again, I'm mentioning this because it's a different kind of program. It's a 2-year program. And Dean is one of those schools that, and there are many that offer both 2-year degrees and 4-year degrees. And some of the 2-year degrees, I hate this term, are called terminal degrees, which means that at the end of 2 years, the expectation is the kid will leave and go on to a career or a job. The other 2-year programs, the transitional ones, are for kids whose goal is to continue for 4 years. So Dean, which has 2-year and 4-year programs, their first 2 years is the ARCH program. And they do a step down. Kids who do choose to go to them for 4 years can access the program, but they have a specific curriculum for those first 2 years. So most colleges, not all, have core requirements, just like Greeley has core requirements. New York State has the most rigorous graduation requirements of any state. They fulfill the core requirements through these special ARCH classes that just go at a different pace, offer more repetition, have some learning specialists involved. Some of the other, again, you need to know your kids and what they need. American University has a program that really just is for higher achieving kids, that helps them learn more about helping them with the reading and the coursework and the quantitative work. So it's a different kind of program. The last one I'll mention is the SALT program.
Can you explain what a higher achieving student means? Because like in this environment, a higher achieving student means one thing, but like in the rest of the country, it kind of
Yeah,
means something else.
American University will
Just saying.
look, for example, at the Wexler score, the WISC, and look especially at the verbal score.
Can you
to
explain their
determine-
IQ tests?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
They
you have
look,
to give them that testing
they look at the
information?
testing and the documentation.
Is that part of your disclosure to them to give the testing information? Or
If the student is applying
to that
to
program?
that program,
Okay.
it's a separate application.
Thank you.
And then obviously the documentation is provided. The SALT program at the University of Arizona was one of the forefronts in this field. And again, has a menu of programs, including specific executive functioning and ADD programs. For an extra fee, they do blank coaching. And what they call that is helping kids structure their own time, helping them learn how to organize themselves. My kids went to school, they didn't have this. Now that my sons are in work positions, they utilize their electronic planners and their electronic organizers the way your kids do in middle school or high school. But they teach them a lot of strategies in terms of life coaching, which is in addition to their academic support programs. So that's just sort of a broad overview of different kinds of programs that are offered.
So given time, being aware of the ability, and if we still have questions and panelists to hear from, I know that I'm going to choose some of the questions that we can go over. At this time, since we have more of an academic type of focus, what I'd like to hear from the panelists are what are the type of independent living skills that you feel students may need as they move forward to college?
And you go for deep program specific, right?
Sorry, but I do want to ask just at some point if we can get back to the documentation question.
Yes, that's part of the college admissions.
Okay.
Clumping some together.
Okay. So independent living skills, I mean, there's can you do your laundry and all of those basics, but we already talked a little bit about self-advocacy and self-awareness, and I think all of us would agree, we cannot stress that enough. Being able to ask for help, as an independent living skill, is the best one you can have. Again, doing your laundry is fine, but you need to be able to recognize that there is a problem or that you need help, and be able to identify someone you can ask. Even if it's, I used to say this to all my students, I might not be the person you're supposed to ask these things, but you can use me if you're comfortable with me. So I always tell my students, pick someone on campus, if it's your RA, if it's your psychologist, if it's me, if it's one of your professors, who can be that point person that you're most comfortable with going to and saying, I need help with something, and we'll get you to the right place if we're not that right person. So I see, when I think about it, just because now I'm working in a more intellectual and developmental disability community, and we talk a lot about independent living skills being, can you take care of your basic life skills? Can you do your laundry? Can you get up and shower yourself and get out? But I look at it more of just in terms of how you can move yourself forward no matter what that is. And to me, it's the self-advocacy and being able to ask for help. Those are the kids that do best and the ones that can come forward and say, I have an issue. They don't need to know how to ask the question. They don't even need to know what the question is. If they just recognize there's a problem and know to go to somebody and say something's not right, we can help you pick apart what it is and figure out what it is. So to me, that's like right at the top.
I interrupt that a little bit because independent living also means, especially if you have ADHD, is taking your own medication by yourself. No parents around. And that worries me about it.
Of course, and I will say that whether it's asking for accommodations or taking your medication, there is a high number of students that have had all of this stuff thrown at them, the special ed, the accommodations, all that, and they have this moment where they can break free and be somewhere else, and very many say, oh good, I got this, I want to try this on my own, and say, I'm not going to do any of that unless I really need it later. And that's problematic for a lot of students. Those students that tend to crash and burn. It's harder to lift yourself up once you've hit that bottom. I always recommend that they start with everything that they can have. They can always mean a little bit.
So I'm talking about actually taking the medication.
Yeah, no, and that's one of them. It's everything.
Nobody's
It's deciding I'm not going to take it, or I'm not going to ask for my accommodation. It's all in that same bag.
Nobody's going to help them with taking
I know that,
medication.
and I have heard of kids taking wrong medication wrong.
There are some technologies that are out there
Yeah.
to help, whether it's reminders or whether it's actually medication machines that will dispense. There actually is a lot out there now. Yeah, we can talk
I'm just still not heard. If you have a child with a chronic medical disability, are there places on campus?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, where, if your child needs medication, my son's diabetic, how do I'm assuming other students who don't have disabilities may also be a diabetic. Are there college campuses, do they have some type of support?
There's always health services, but they're not going to medicate. They're not going to remind somebody that they have to medicate. They may provide space for you to do, if you're a commuter, there may be space allowed within a health services center to take care of whatever medical need you might have.
Psychiatrists on campus.
It varies campus to campus. Counseling centers can range from having psychologists to having just master's level counselors to having social workers. Every campus is a little different.
Having one for the entire population, or having a real site support
So,
center.
as Barbara said earlier, thinking about the very beginning, what are your child's needs, and thinking about all of them. That's your list of questions. When you figure out what those needs are, what those support needs are, that's how you create your list of questions when you're going to each of these campuses, or when you're trying to research the campuses online and seeing what they have to figure out if it's the right match.
Community resources that are available around that college. I think both Carrie and Andre too have mentioned it's important to know what are the
Well,
supports
I think
that are
we're
available.
past that. We're waiting to hear about what schools it gets into. So, and we're also in the music world, and we don't have a choice with schools. I would say like that. So we're gonna have to put the cart before the horse, and that's what
I
concerns me.
will say
might not have
I
choices.
think there are more and more independent service providers that are pushing services into
That
colleges,
sounds good.
and colleges are allowing that more and more. I think in the beginning they were resistant because of privacy rights and everything.
Right.
But there are relationships that private providers now have, whether it's an agency or individual providers, where they can come in and provide support, because it may be that kind of situation where you're limited to the choices, and that school might not have what you need, but there might be some
Right.
push-in available
That's good to
to
know.
provide that support.
So, I know that there are some questions, but I just want to be respectful of time. So Richard, if you can please share your experiences,
Sure.
thoughts that you have for the audience as well with Karen.
Just to supplement some of the things that Barbara and Karen said, a K&W guide can tell you the names of the programs, the names of the person that you want to speak to, and their phone numbers. So it's there. I can tell you, I read in my catchment area that I wanted my child to go to school. I read every college's information, and I called directly to that person. And in minutes, I knew whether they had the level of service that I wanted for my child. So that it's there. You don't have to be Googling it and finding the right or wrong thing. It's in that book. That's one. For me, what was my biggest challenge? So my biggest challenges will be, the answers for that will be the same basically as the question. First, I sat in your seat over 5 years ago, and for many years before that, and it was very anxiety provoking, as we all know. I was on the special ed committee for 10 years at least, because I was interested, and I think everybody here is interested, and that's why you're here. It works out 99% of the time. That's the first thing. The biggest challenge for my student might have been liking school as a freshman and a sophomore, and not really wanting to come to school, but did, eked it out, managed, and then getting him into life school. And I know I assume life school is still in business, and not everybody can get into life school, but if you can, I recommend it. And my son didn't want to go to life school. And then I never heard anymore, I don't like school. I don't want to go to school. Then it was great.
Life school to college?
Life school at Horace Greeley. So that was the first challenge, liking school and then getting through the first 2 years. Next biggest challenge, probably time management and reading. My child, two of my three children, really didn't like to read, didn't read much. Didn't have a lot of interests other than sports and music. And And so I listened to all my special educators, let them read about sports, let them read comic books, let them read, the newspaper comics. So we tried and, we did that stuff. The time management, trying to make sure they learn how to spend their free time appropriately, obviously leading into college. That's huge in college. Barbara's 100% right. Go to school 3 hours a day, most days. What do you do the rest of the day? If you don't know how to study, which is also another thing. Buying into the disability, accepting it, and using all the strategies, though they may sound simple when you're a college freshman or a high school senior, that you learned in 7th, 8th, elementary school going on, because they work. And even the strategy is texting your mother. How do you spell that? It's a strategy. It works. Nobody has to know about it. Who cares? And one of the last thing that I'll say about the challenges, having your student be interested in what I call incidental knowledge, incidental learning, world events, current events. Your child is going to be in groups of other children, high school, gap years, college students. When they don't know about something, other children are mean. And when I say children, I mean elementary school, high school, college, and just beyond. And they look at you sideways and they'll call you stupid. What do you mean you don't know about the gun march that's going on in March? It's all over the news. Well, I'm not really that interested. No. So you try to help your child round themselves out, have a little bit of knowledge, know what's on. And they can do it on their phones. They can do it through Google Feed, News Feed, Yahoo News Feed, which is terrible, but they can get some basic information. What's going on in the world? So, one of the things I wish I had done more, which I did plenty of, is drumming in better time management, trying to get them to buy into the disability, the life school, world knowledge, as I said. Just a couple of things. My kids were young chronologically. Started them in kindergarten at 5. They were also had an early birthday, October. We wanted our kids to take a gap year from maturation process, life process. There's not a rush. I agree with virtually everything Terry said. There's no rush if you can afford it, certainly. But maybe you have to afford it. Child is not necessarily ready coming out of Greeley to go to college. Also, at Greeley, your designated students are listening to all the typical students, which Ivy League school they're going to, or which grade school they're going to. And they may not get into any of those schools. So one of the questions, was where you should go to look at college and that sort of thing. Me, try to pick the right level of college to go to. And as Barbara said, you got to know everything you want to know before you go visit the college. Also, who are you going to go to visit the college with? I have twins. All of us went to both the typical students' potential college and the designated students' college. Not a great idea, okay? My son walked away from the typical students' college. I'm never going to get into college. Never. So that's not very encouraging. What I want to tell you is your son or daughter will get into college. Not only will they get into college, you'll be surprised at how many colleges they get into. And you'll be surprised you'll be offered scholarships. I'm not talking about full ride scholarships, but I'm talking a significant amount of money. Thousands of dollars, not half tuition or this and that. And it was like, they'll get in. And to add to what Barbara and Karen were saying, just a couple of colleges that I experienced. Curry College has got a great PAL program in Massachusetts. I think in this area, if you don't want to go too far, great hands-on college. And they want kids from schools like this. Whether you are, especially, my son has ADD and processing issues. If you were sitting talking to him, you'd never know he had disabilities. But trust me, he had disabilities. And they, as I say, they offered him scholarships. He started at Endicott College. Not well-known, small college, also in Mass. Good hands-on programs. And why he chose that school, and we agreed. We wanted him to go to Curry. It was great support. Endicott has good support, but they have a requirement of 3 internships at Endicott during your 8 semesters. And the last semester is 4 internship. And my son learns better outside the classroom. He's an experiential learner. And at Greeley, he had to do 2 internships. Shorter ones, 6 weeks like that. But that led him to, this is good. And then, Endicott had 3. He's at UConn now. So here's the other thing. My son probably would not have gotten into UConn after Greeley. He went to Endicott. He got the best grades he ever got in a while. But that allowed him to get into UConn. And somebody said about emotional well-being, number one. He was terribly unhappy at Endicott. All it was a function of who his roommate was, who the friends were, and he had to get out of that environment. I don't know how he did so well, academically. Well, he was unhappy. And he got to UConn, found a group, made friends. It's just another different world. Now, has he struggled with some courses? Yeah. It's a much harder school. And that's what I mean about level of school. Pick the right level of school. And that's, we did a gap year. And I recommend that. I can talk to some gap issues if you want to ask questions or after.
So Karen, I'm going to go back to you just in regards to the accommodation components. If you can just share the academic accommodations, the process in which you do them, lead us if we have time into college admission.
Sure. So what I will tell you when you're visiting the schools is they're not going to be able to tell you what accommodations they can guarantee for your child because they're not really allowed to accept your disability documentation until you've been accepted to the college. The reason being is if I, as a disability coordinator, took that information, I'm not really supposed to talk to admissions, but there could be an appearance of bias, and then if you don't get into the college, you can say, well, that was because of my disability. So most colleges will say to you, I can tell you generally what accommodations we have here and how we offer them, but I can't tell you what you're going to get until after I see your documentation and can look at it. So in terms of that timeline question we had from the back before, the timeline is that when you're visiting the colleges, you're asking general questions. And you want to be asking not just, do you have this accommodation, but how do you offer this accommodation? Think about extra time testing. So is that in a private separate room? Is it extra time in the classroom with the professor? What does your student, your child prefer? So thinking about note-taking is another one. Every school is going to do it differently. Some have recording allowances, some don't. Some do volunteers, some have peers taking notes. Who's to say their notes are going to be any better? So there's a lot of how is that accommodation done here, not what is the accommodation you offer. Because most of them offer about the same. And in your packet, there's a list of just some samples. But you want to be asking those kind of general questions. How do you give these accommodations? What do they look like on this campus? Then once you've been accepted to the college, then you can start engaging with the disability office. And for me, when I was there, I preferred to know well in advance who was coming. So as soon as someone's accepted, when people come on tours, and yes, you absolutely want to go and talk to the disability office when you're on campus, I would make a list of who, and then I'd compare it once I saw acceptance lists. and see who had visited, who was coming. And then those folks, I encouraged them to reach out to me as soon as they had their acceptance so that we could actually start to talk specifics. And after acceptance is when I would allow them to send documentation. Every campus is going to do it a little differently. There is no hard and fast rule of this is how you have to do it. Schools have to have IEPs. Colleges don't have to go by any specific rule. There is an organization, a professional organization called AHEAD, which is Association of Higher Education and Disability. They are sort of the guiding professional organization for disability offices, and they do put out guidelines for documentation, for how you should do things, but it really is the college's choice. The good news is there is less over the years. There is now, from AHEAD and from the guidance and what's gone on, there is less emphasis on documentation than there used to be. But you may encounter some colleges that are hard and fast. I need this documentation that has to be this many years old. So what I'll tell you is that in terms of documentation, you're not going to worry here. You guys are going to get good, strong documentation that's current enough for college. So you probably do not need to worry about that. But typically, colleges are looking for a learning disability. They're looking for something within 3 years. For something that's a mental health disability, they want something usually a little more current, within a year, that identifies the disability. That IEP is part of the discussion because it really used to be you handed in documentation, and for anybody who's applied to the College Board for testing, they're very rigid that you have to have specific tests and they have to look like this, that, or the other. The people never meet your child. It's just on paper who they are and they approve or they don't approve those accommodations. The experience at the college should be very different than that. It should be a combination of a conversation with the student, a look at the history of what they might have, which is that summary, that exit summary, and or the IEP, and if you have it, documentation. Schools aren't necessarily allowed to, under the ADA, put an undue burden on families. And so if there's testing that's 6 years old, we can't say to you, well, you have to get me something new and go spend $5,000 on a new test if the school isn't willing to do a new one because you're a senior and you're about to graduate. So because of that, the shift has gone a little bit more, away from documentation only and has tried to take a more holistic approach. So most colleges are on board with that, but you may still have some other ones that are saying, we just absolutely need that documentation.
That's what I mentioned when I spoke about the paperwork that we get when I review it. And if there's any sort of wiggle room, I really don't maybe leave it to the college. You just have the New York State licensed psychologist do the testing, write up the list of the accommodations, and ask the students going on in college. That's a psychological way to take it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
And the coordinated programs, as we mentioned, work a little bit differently, where often you do have to apply for that program as you're applying to college. And they do require documentation, and your office can facilitate that, but because they want to see the level of support that's needed. Again, it's not to discriminate against your kids at all, but to place them into the right program.
And, so that's, the earliest you can be submitting documentation is after acceptance, but it can be submitted in your senior year because all of a sudden you're starting to have issues. There's no too late to do it. It's really when you want to have it. So most people want to have it all set up by the time they come to the school, and that's certainly what I would always recommend. But there's plenty of people who sort of just want to wait and see how they do and try it out first, and maybe they'll show up in their second semester or their second year. So there is no too late. I've had people come their very last semester after 4 years of school and start to ask for accommodations because things all of a sudden got really challenging for them. But most people up front, anytime after acceptance and before starting is the ideal time.
And I think sometimes like a student might have gotten a certain accommodation in high school, and then with the exit IEP, the accommodation is no longer there. But sometimes in college they might feel they need that specific accommodation. So we've been asked sometimes to provide documentation that supports getting that accommodation.
Yeah, and again, the accommodation may look different than how it looks in high school. And very often the accommodations, the list might get shorter. The colleges are not giving accommodation to help your students succeed. That's not what it's about. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's about equal access. And so it's really looking at what is the challenge and is there accommodation that can level the playing field and give you equal access. It's not about what would benefit. Everybody would benefit from extra time, probably. Everybody would benefit from an extra copy of notes, probably. So it's not about what will help you succeed. It's about just what will give you access, equal access under ADA.
I just want to clarify what you're saying so I understand. The accommodations that you're talking about once you get accepted, going in and talking to them about, you're just talking about specific general ed students that haven't been, as you said, accepted into some sort of comprehensive or, additional programming. Was that what you meant?
Any student with a disability who feels they need an accommodation can go
Okay,
into
so-
disability services and ask for an accommodation.
So whether they're in a specific program or not?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
I just want to bring up one thing because parents are concerned with this. With respect to the College Board testing, the SAT and the ACT, we asked for a word processor and a computer because most of all of us could not read my son's handwriting, and they denied him. And all I'll say is don't give up. Send it in again, figure out what to send in. And what I did was send in his writings from school that the teachers graded. So you saw, maybe I would have made it up, but you saw teachers' red marks and stuff. I sent in 10 pieces at least and said, look, this is how my son writes. You people are going to spend a lot of extra time trying to read this. It'll be much easier if he had a word processor, and they gave it to me. So don't give up right away.
And although SATs and ACTs are not my area of expertise by any means, I think the College Board also fluctuates in how strict they're being with the accommodations during that year. Similar to how New York State makes changes many times as time moves forward. I think right now we're more in terms of where they're a little bit more flexible in terms of accepting accommodations as they were years ago. And I see some head nods, so I think you probably experienced some of that as well. If a student is denied from the testing accommodations for SAT or ACT, your school counselor will appeal that decision if that's what you agree on together. But that's just my
Jim, the only thing is, there's only this list of options, there's only one requires SAT or ACT, and that's four-year college. All the other choices don't, it's not a necessary element.
And if
So-
I could just add to that, test optional is a trend that's going on, and some of the most competitive colleges in this country are now test optional. Places like Bowdoin College and Wesleyan University, because they're finding that these tests, counselors have known for years, are not doing what they were intended to do, which is predicting success in college. So don't feel that test optional is just for students who have learning needs. It certainly is not. And again, colleges the movement is away from standardized testing, not to add more. There are only 10 colleges in the country that require SAT subject tests, by the way. And even some Ivy League schools are not requiring them anymore. So testing is being minimized.
And some of these colleges, on a little different note, they're even encouraging students to take gap years. So you will see that in some Ivy League acceptances.
It's on the Harvard website,
There
first
you go.
page.
There you go.
Have you considered a gap year?
Right. They'll take you, they'll let you defer, and then you can come back to school.
And
The
by the
other-
way, there's an AmeriCorps, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. AmeriCorps, we talked about the cost of these programs, and although the current administration has decreased the funding considerably, it's still going on. And AmeriCorps is an umbrella organization that's basically the domestic Peace Corps. My son did a program under AmeriCorps called City Year, where he happened to be assigned to Providence, Rhode Island. This is free. Not only is it free, they pay basic living expenses, and the kids, after they finish it, get a college scholarship. Not a lot, but a little bit, and you would have to supplement, just like you're going to supplement them when they're in college. But it is something to look into, and it is free. And research, as you said, Richard, at every level of selectivity. Research has shown that gap years are one of the best things to predict college success, because they sort of get rid of that silliness. they've learned more to deal with the freedom of not living in their homes, and they're more mature when they enter college.
100%. And your kids may not buy into it. My kids didn't buy into it. But both my twins ended up doing either a gap semester or a gap year. So, and then my older one said, why didn't I do it?
I just had a question about the standardized testing. After going through 10 hours it took us to complete this thing, and I don't know if I can do that again, the score. I am hearing some people are like the score matter, some people are like this is just a hoop you're jumping through in order to qualify. Somebody said the schools want to see what your weakness is. I heard someone say to me, no, he has to get this, keep taking this test again so that he gets a better score so he can get into this college. I mean, I'm getting a myriad and I'm overwhelmed. And going through that 10 hours, I don't think I can do that again.
You're seeing me cringe because I don't, there are more movements in our testing than I think about any other part of the admission process. But just give you some general information, 63% of students nationally take the ACT. College is business. I always say that first. The College Board has really diminished their need for documentation at all. Your counselors will work through this. Every high school, and I don't know, let's see what you've named the person here, as an SDS coordinator that facilitates, and that's why I have testing accommodation on the ACT and the SAT. One of the rumors is it's much harder to get on the ACT because the ACT does require documentation. Just last week I had a student apply for just extended time on the ACT, and they gave her computer, they gave her special room, they gave her many more accommodations than she had asked for. So it's a different process for each agency. I'm not going to go into that now. A lot of it is on this info sheet that I gave you, and your counselors are very familiar with it, I'm sure. But ask for it, and as Richard said, if you don't get it, ask again.
So, I do want, just as a time, do I ask a question, then I'm going to wrap it up?
Okay. You had mentioned before about the application process. You recommend somebody to disclose perhaps if they have ADHD, if the grades fluctuate or not. Do schools only accept like a certain number of people with disability? Do they hold
We're
spots?
both shaking our heads.
Right. But somebody told me, like, for a particular competitive college, one that a lot of kids apply to from here, that her husband's on the board or whatever, that absolutely you should disclose it because they do have a certain number of spots for kids who've had IEPs. So do you typically recommend, other than grades, like if a child's grades are fairly stable or
First of all,
somewhat
they can't
competitive?
discriminate. It's illegal. They cannot discriminate. And in my experience, they do not. I gave you very general advice. Your advice has to be specific to your child.
The question was, is it an advantage to disclose because they
Yes.
have to accept a certain number of students with disabilities?
There's no quota that they need to accept and no quota that they can't.
Well, they don't need to, but I've heard just in the grapevine, somebody who sits on a, you know.
And it really, I mean, it's, bottom line is, it's a very personal decision. The school's not going to ask unless they're applying to a comprehensive program or it's a requirement.
Right.
The school's not going to ask, they're not allowed, and it's not going to be on their record. So it's
So what do
a
you
personal
think?
decision, and it usually comes through in the
I
essay.
did not disclose. We did not disclose.
We did disclose.
And we got into plenty of colleges.
And we did,
And you did. Why?
because there was a discrepancy between his grades and his scores.
So I think, I know this is it's a large topic, many
Yeah.
questions, but just given that we are
Can I just say something from the way that Access VR looks at it? We look at it separately, like you would at a job. Disability and the job, we look at it separately. The varsity accommodation, the way that it was with the ADA, same thing for the academic. It's a separate thing. And I also want to say one thing. I've seen schools that are 70,000 a year that offer almost horrible disability services. And I've seen most schools and students that offer good.